Hi, I'm Derek Ashong. Welcome to the stream. This is our pre-show where we get a chance to talk about some of the issues of the day. We're going to go to our live broadcast as always in just a few minutes, and we will be here continuing the conversation in the post-show, so definitely stay with us here online. Ahmed and John, great to see you both today. Ahmed, we got an interesting story about the BBC and Twitter. What's going on there?
Well, let's just read this headline for a second. I'm going to blow it up a bit. It says, BBC acts to stop Twitter leaks by stars and writers. So what's apparently prompted this is this news. I believe this is Sophie Ellis-Bextor, who let it slip on Twitter that Sting was going to appear on the Ricky Gervais new BBC comedy called Life's Too Short. And so apparently BBC executives are really frustrated and angry because they feel as though they need to control how, information is leaked. They don't want information coming out until, it's scheduled to be promoted.
Now, she's an actor on a BBC show.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how they go about this particular ban. I mean, I'm guessing she wasn't banned from using Twitter in her contract.
Well, that's the thing. I think maybe they're going to... It says right here that according to senior sources, the need for a ban has been a widely held view among, the kind of elite top execs at the company.
Yeah.
So the irony to me is the BBC is heavily involved in news coverage, not just entertainment. So how are they going to separate the two? Because obviously you can't ban Twitter in this day and age on the news side of things, otherwise you might not be as informed as you might otherwise need to be.
Yeah,
right?
and where does it stop? What's the line? I mean, people have lives outside of their professional work, and how do they enforce that without inflicting undue restraint on people's personal perspectives?
Right.
Well, it also makes it seem like, like what exactly is happening at BBC, because there are lots of media companies out there that are on Twitter that also have, company secrets that they don't want revealed until the time that they would love their audience to know. Right. So maybe BBC should be, could it be possible that they're putting themselves in a compromising situation when other people are finding ways of keeping their secrets without preventing themselves from using a platform like Twitter where they can reach so many viewers?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's so interesting. We've seen different reactions to complicated issues that involve, the ability of online tools like Twitter to basically publish information, not just by companies like the BBC, but even by governments. And in a way, you could say that the BBC is following in the path of certain, governments and leaders, where when they recognize the power of these tools to kind of sabotage their plans, whether it's a government or a company. In this case, the BBC is just shutting down. They're deciding to completely shut down and ban Twitter. Now, that's a bit extreme. Like, isn't there a way to maybe control the use of Twitter?
Right.
Or maybe punish your employees rather than, prevent the tool from being used?
Because, I mean, it seems, I don't know I'm interested in what you think, John, because it seems to me like they're missing the point here. Right. If an employee is so undisciplined that they're going to go and tell the secret on Twitter, maybe should you ban Facebook as well?
Is Twitter really the problem there?
Should you ban email? Should you ban cell phone usage? This person could just as well call their auntie in Hempstead and give up the info there.
No, I mean, it's, even PJ Crowley and in the government, we're not just seeing this in entertainment or in media. We're seeing, government employees getting slapped on the wrist for publishing tweets. The lines between professionalism and personal life is kind of being blurred because we're using these really powerful tools in both realms, right? Yeah. So maybe she was just tweeting to her cousin. Who knows?
Maybe she needs Google Plus.
Right.
Just create a circle around her audience,
Exactly. Only certain people will get that information.
That's actually a really good point, frankly. Yeah, I mean, that's the appeal of Google Plus. I guess, within a certain realm, because you can control.
Yeah, so we should be clear, because a week ago we were like, hey, Google Plus is really cool. Why aren't we invited? I guess we're all on now.
Yeah. Funny how things change.
So what do you guys think so far?
Well, no, I mean, that's exactly how I've been using Plus. Like, I find it much more malleable to a professional environment than Facebook, which has all my high school friends, all my elementary school friends. This is just, I know who's in this circle, I know who's in that circle because I'm creating those.
Hey, guys, just very quickly, let's go back to the BBC thing, because we got a tweet that came in, which is somewhat rare, actually, in the pre-show, but LiveJ says, oops, the BBC denies, and then there's a link to this a press release. So this just came out saying, the BBC today issued the following statement. The BBC is not banning the use of Twitter by talent or writers. The BBC has clear guidelines in place for both the personal and professional use of social media, and we encourage staff, writers, and talent to use social media provided it does not break any confidentiality. So clearly they were listening to our conversation, and then
they responded immediately, because if it was on the stream, BBC had to make sure they jumped on it.
But we should say that this article that we were sourcing is in The Guardian, and it actually does
from
quote,
today.
Yeah, it is,
yes.
and I'm going to quote just this guy because It quotes someone anonymously saying, an executive from the BBC said, "There's no doubt that Twitter is a popular communications phenomenon, but it can also be quite disruptive if artists tweet about an appearance on a show and, so on and so forth." So no one is saying, I guess no one on the BBC has been, on the record saying that they were going to ban it. Yeah. Although this article seems to definitely convince you that that's what they're considering.
It seems like they're trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer here. Yeah. Because ultimately what really happened, everyone now knows that Sting is going to be on the Ricky Gervais show.
Right. They brought more attention to it.
Yeah, I doubt that they're going to lose any viewers. Right. I don't think that a single person who would have tuned in if they'd announced it the way they wanted to is not going to tune in now.
It's so funny because this to me is really all about control and controlling your message, but it's really, I think, indicative of a lot of traditional media, and it's a natural occurrence, that they want to be in such control that perhaps they don't necessarily recognize the opportunities that might be beneficial to them in actually, easing up a bit on the control and letting people do some of their work for them within a relatively controlled environment.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so actually that brings up an interesting question. Because what we're doing here is sitting at the intersection of these two worlds. Traditional media got a massive television platform via Al Jazeera English, but then we're here and we're very wired, we're very connected, we're always communicating with people online, and that's where a lot of our stories are sourced from. Right. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that more news media is going to go in this direction, or are they going to go in the direction of trying to seek more control?
Yeah, no, I think that figuring out that ebb and flow of how much information to consume on the fly and how much information to push back, that's the new challenge of news, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this shows a great example of leveraging both. You're broadcasting and receiving information at the same time.
Yeah. I feel like it's like users want to be connected and they have an opinion on what's going on. So hopefully we're helping to provide that. Today's show is really special because it's all about stuff that has come from our users. It's entirely driven by
anecdotally, today's show, remains to see how it goes, could not have been done had we not relied quite heavily, actually, on our community online.
Absolutely. And so on that point, we're going to invite you, the online community, to join us on TV. We're going on air right now. You're not going to want to miss this one. It's all about you. Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in The Stream, a social media community with its own daily TV show. We're bringing you stories that are ongoing, global, and sourced from social media. Today, how social media is giving a voice to a lone protester in South Korea, and a unique workers' rights caravan in the Philippines. As always, our digital producer, Ahmed Shahab Eldin, is here looking out for your feedback. Also joining us on the couch today is John Gossier, the co-founder of MetaLayer Inc., a platform for adding context to photos. John, what does that mean to add context?
So essentially trying to extract value from a photo with minimal human effort. So we receive photos, we extract the text, we parse that, and then we look for relationships in that data.
Okay, and how does this, for me as a user, how does this enhance my experience of those images?
Sure. So you can imagine right now, if you want to perform visual search using other tools that are out there, you get back information, but it's still a very manual process. You still have to sort of dig through to find what you want. Mm-hmm. Basically, we're trying to make that content actionable. So if you're scanning a business card, you've got the email address, you can just email that person right away. Yeah. If it's a Twitter account, you just tweet that right away. If it's a person, you might find other photos of that person, not based on facial recognition, but based on other contexts.
So it's like you're basically making these images come out more alive.
Yeah, we're smart or semantic photos.
Okay, I love it. That's really cool. Well, it's great to have you here. I know that you used to work with Ushahidi as well. I want to get a little bit more information about that in the post show, but thanks so much for joining us. Ahmed, speaking of cool things online and making the web come alive, what kind of things have people been talking to us about?
Well, today, Derek, it's no surprise, or should come as no surprise, that everyone's talking about the Flotilla 2. So efforts by people who are...
For those of our viewers who are not aware of it. Explain what Flotilla 2 is all about.
Right, so Flotilla 2 is two new, renewed efforts essentially to send a humanitarian aid, international aid to Gaza to end the siege, to break the blockade. And we can see right here using TrendsMap that this is being discussed in the US, in Europe, in Africa, all over. And one tweet that came into us from Hamamitsu said, "I'm sure you'll mention it, but I thought I'd flag it anyway." And as he calls it, it's the inhumane Greek flotilla blockade. Now, Jalal A.K. Jojo, who is a 16-year-old blogger in Jerusalem, who was actually on our show a couple weeks ago,
and
said,
who I actually met there a couple weeks ago.
Right, when you were there, exactly.
Yeah.
He said, "I guess you've already heard that the Tahrir Canadian boat was just boarded by Greek commandos, and it's now heading back to port." Now, this was several hours ago. This is the second attempt. The first attempt was a U.S. ship called the Audacity of Hope, which was returned. And now the second ship, as you can see here, was returned within 15 minutes. So the Canadian boat called Tahrir, which I'm sure you're familiar, is a word which means freedom and comes from Tahrir Square in Egypt. But then Joseph Dana, who's also been on the show and who was on the Audacity of Hope as a journalist trying to cover the story, basically said to us, it's over. The Flotilla 2 has been stopped by the Greek government. So the question is, according to Jalal, maybe C isn't the approach. Now we're seeing that on July 8th, people are going to try to break the blockade by arriving in Ben Gurion Airport. See right here, Jalal tweeted us, "Have you heard of the air flotilla scheduled to arrive at Tel Aviv in the next few weeks to later head to Gaza?" Now, this is one website where we're going to be tweeting this out, where you can follow the story where they're calling on civil society organizations and people of conscience, as you can see right here, around the world to come to Palestine on July 8th for a week of fellowship and peace building. They chose July 8th because in 2004, the International Court of Justice from the UN stated that the Israeli West Bank separation barrier was illegal, and so that's why they chose this date. Do you think this is a good approach?
Well, I think there's always a place for peaceful protests and demonstrations, and I think that that's a powerful statement. This happened a year ago. There was a statement, however tragic it turned out.
Right.
It was a statement that was heard around the world and actually amplified their message.
Well, speaking of amplifying messages, you can have your voice and you can help us put together these stories using the same tools we use. It's called Storify. And it pulls together elements such as videos and photos, as you saw in this story, and audio from across social media. So put together a story for us, and if we like it, we may take it to air. But if you're not familiar with Storify, we've got a quick video right here to help you figure out how you can use the tool.
Storify is a narrative tool for the social media age. Log in with your Twitter account. Search what people are saying on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, pretty much anywhere on the web. Then rearrange them any way you like. Add your own explanations and thoughts, and publish your story for the world to see. Share those stories with us, and they, and you, might just wind up in the stream. Today's viewer-suggested story from @LiveJ about Kim Jin-suk, a South Korean woman who's been protesting on top of a 35-meter crane, is one that we've mentioned before. The reason we've decided to come back to it is not only because our online community keeps updating us, but also because we managed to speak with Kim Jin-suk. We'll get to what she said in a minute, but first, let's explain what's happened so far. Now, in early January, Kim Jin-suk climbed onto a crane located at the Hanjin Heavy Industries and Construction Shipyard after the company announced initial plans to lay off 400 workers in an attempt to move jobs to cheaper destinations like the Philippines. Kim Jin-suk, a former employee and a member of the company's labor union, joined unionists who'd already been holding a sit-in at the shipyard. Now, I want to take a little bit of another image. This is her actually on the top of this crane speaking to workers who are watching from below. Now, I do want to share with you another video that I think is salient and worth considering what's actually happening here on the ground. Violence has broken out on numerous occasions between those who are striking and private security. Although the Hanjin Labor Union did reach a deal with the company last week, about 60 unionized workers have rejected the agreement because the layoffs will remain. Kim has also refused to end her protest, and she remains perched on the crane. We were able to speak with her through someone who contacted us via Twitter. We sent that person questions to ask Kim Jin-suk, who then called her back and recorded her audio on a smartphone. The audio file was sent to us via email, and here, if you'll bear with me, is some of what Kim Jin-suk had to say.
예, 저는 부산, 대한민국 부산 영도에 있는 한진중공업
I am Kim Jin-suk on crane number 85 at the shipyard of Hanjin Heavy Industry and Construction in Uiwangdo, Busan.
김진숙이라는 사람입니다.
I'm 52 years old. I've been clinging to this crane for 179 days because the company laid 170 laborers off. The laborers opposed the layoff.
한진중공업 사측이
I'm here to stop the layoffs. Hanjin Heavy Industry and Construction already carried out a massive layoff of 650 workers in 2003.
한진중공업의 종리해고에
The company claims that the layoffs were necessary on account of management. However, in 2010 alone, the company gained a surplus of $48 million and made business profits of $65.6 million.
예, 전기는 지금 완전히 끊어진
Electricity is completely cut off. At night, it is totally dark here. Because the crane is 35 meters high above the ground, there's a possibility of safety accidents. Many people and organizations asked for electricity, but the company still refuses to provide electricity. It seems that the company is afraid that the current situation will be known to the public by Twitter. The company gives me batteries for a non-internet cell phone, but not batteries for a smartphone with which I could do Twitter. They are very strict on it.
저도 내려가고 싶습니다.
I want to walk down. I want to meet the people I miss, eat what I want to eat, and go where I want to go.
가고 싶은 곳도 가고 싶습니다. 저는
But I can't leave this crane alive until the company withdraws the layoffs.
이 크레인을 살아 내려갈 수가 없습니다.
Now, these issues that Kim Jin-suk brings up aren't exclusive to South Korea. Hanjin also operates in the Philippines and is facing even harsher accusations there. Protesters allege that since the company opened their Philippines branch in 2006, there have been 5,000 injuries at the shipyard, including 31 worker deaths. I want to show you some footage that we also found from the Philippines. This actually came in the form of a slideshow. Now, on Sunday, the Church Labor Conference, an alliance of church congregations and labor organizations, held a caravan for decent work and humane working conditions. Labor groups in the Philippines have described Hanjin as the graveyard for workers' rights, and they're demanding better safety conditions and wages. One of the Philippines Labor Party websites has actually published a press release about Hanjin worker conditions, and in part it reads, labor groups in the country are getting more incensed with the unabated cases of deaths and accidents at Hanjin, many of them reported and documented, yet largely ignored by the company and government officials. Joining us now via Skype from the Hanjin shipyard in Busan, South Korea, is Sung-mi Park. She's an award-winning South Korean film director who's been taking part in the protest. We also have joining us via Skype from Mandaluyong City in the Philippines, Presi Daguk, the Secretary General for the Makabayan Workers for People's Liberation. She's been involved in organizing the Hanjin workers there. Sung-mi and Presi, actually, we're going to go to the two of them. Right now, I believe we only have audio for Presi. So, Presi, can you hear us? Okay, how about you, Sung-mi? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Sung-mi, thank you so much for joining us from South Korea. Tell us a little bit about why you are participating in these protests.
I am very passionate of her life, Kim Jin. And yeah, her life story touched me very much. And I want to participate. I decided to participate to support her.
Okay, I want to ask you to hold there for 1 second, Sung-mi. We're going to take a quick pause to try to get your video up for just a second. But while we're doing that, this is a really intriguing story because it's one that we've been following now for about a month.
Yeah.
And we've been consistently getting more feedback from people. And one of the things that I think is really interesting in this instance is it's not simply that the workers are upset that there's strikes. What is being written about this in Korean press is that because of the lack of a social safety net in the Korean economy, some people see losing their job as a death sentence. And there have actually been a couple of suicides, a number of suicides of workers, one of which happened on that very crane that's Kim Jin-suk is protesting on.
Right. The interesting thing is you said, there's no safety net for society. Ironically, yesterday or the day before, the police actually created a safety net underneath the crane because there's fears after a tweet from Sinjun Kim that she would she'd either come down on her own accord and she would not be forcibly removed. There are fears that she would essentially commit suicide. And I believe that's what we were going to just ask. I want to just share before we ask our guests some questions that this story has come in and been reported to us through Storify on multiple occasions. I don't know if you can see my screen. We have tweets and videos that are coming in, showing the actual arrests that have been made today. Apparently 22 people have been arrested, and the story, even though it's been going on for 6 months, is now only starting to really, grow now that her phone has been confiscated by authorities. And ironically, the people who are being arrested are people with smartphones, people who can take photos. Yes. People, so I don't know, you could obviously speak to that. Why are they arresting those people as opposed to other protesters?
Well, obviously the communication is just easier to spread that way. You've got multiple ways of sharing photos, photo sharing networks, you've got Twitter, you've got email on the phones. Perhaps another angle to that is the location features of the phone themselves.
Right.
I don't know how sophisticated the crackdown is, but maybe that's actually become a weapon that's being used against.
It's interesting because we got tweets today saying that when the police came, they actually arrested those with smartphones first. Now, I want to go back to our Skype guest, and I'm going to go to Seung-mi first. Seung-mi, we see that you were there. We see the crane actually from Hanjin in the background, so you're right there on the location. I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about the broader labor issue. Why does this matter so much in South Korea?
Why this issue is so much spread in Korea?
Yeah.
Yes.
You mean?
Yes.
Because actually she's using the Twitter, and I thought the Twitter users was passionate from her Twitter because she's tweeting with joy and humor, and there's many fans of Kim Jin-suk, I think, and her tweeting touched the people.
Now, Seung-mi, a quick question.
Yes.
You're there at the actual shipyard where just, hours ago, about 20 people were arrested for striking and protesting and supporting her, and I can see the crane behind you. One tweet we have from Galila is saying the police arrested smartphone users and camera users first. Why were you not arrested, and more importantly, why are you there at 4:30 in the morning?
Anyway, fortunately, when I arrived, they already arrested the people, and one of my friends called me, pay attention and don't take a picture and hide smartphone like this. Yeah.
Okay, and Seung-mi, another question about the fundamental protest. Is the concern that the jobs are being shipped overseas? Why are people so upset about it?
What does it mean?
Okay, basically, why are people in Korea so upset about Hanjin getting rid of these jobs?
Yeah, because they don't concern about the people's life. They don't care about the people. They care only about the money.
And
so, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yes. So this violence of the capitalism, I think, and every Korean people is touched by her tweet and her life. Very blessed life.
Now, I want to give some context as well there to what Seung-mi just said, because part of what's happening is they're saying, yes, they're getting rid of these jobs, but at the same time, in January, they made a payment of, I believe it was 17 billion won to a small group of protesters. The amount that they paid those, I'm sorry, not a protester, a small group of shareholders, the amount they paid for those shareholders is the equivalent of the combined income of 170 of the workers who refused to accept the layoffs. So the question is, you're giving dividends to shareholders, but you're cutting back jobs from the workers. And the question is, maybe they're trying to move them to other areas where they can get a better price. And I actually want to bring Pressy into that because of this point. People are saying in Korea that the jobs are being sent to Philippines because they can get more efficient workers for cheaper. I'm curious, why are people in the Philippines also protesting? Are you not happy to be having those jobs?
First, of course, given the large number of unemployed in the Philippines, we Filipinos are glad that a shipbuilding company based in South Korea came in the Philippines to employ 21,000 workers. But at the same time, we as workers who feel the same way as the workers in South Korea who are being deprived of their right to security of tenure are unhappy because we are both affected by the same company that represses the workers' rights. We, the workers here in the Philippines, that is based in Subic, Zambales, the Hanjin workers in Subic, Zambales, are being deprived of our basic labor rights, such as having safety inside the shipyard.
Now, at that point of safety within the shipyard, we're hearing reports that a significant number of deaths have happened and many, many more injuries have happened since the shipyard opened in 2006. Why has the Philippine government not held Hanjin responsible?
That is what our hearts are aching for at this moment, because there has been several attempts by the government to show us that it has the political will to address the 4-year ongoing problem of the workers in the Hanjin shipyard in Subic through a Senate Labor Committee hearing that was an investigation that was held on February 2009. But the Senate Labor Committee head, Chairman Senator Jinggoy Estrada, only issued several recommendations that are based on what the law is talking about occupational health and safety implementation inside the shipyard, such as creating a 300-bed hospital facility in order to ensure that the workers who suffer from grave accidents inside the shipyard will be treated immediately.
Okay, now I want to interrupt you there, Presi, for just one quick second. I want to get your thoughts on this, John, because it seems like you've got a situation that's been going on for a long time in both Korea and in the Philippines. Yeah. Now you've got these protests rising in both areas, but it's not getting a lot of international media coverage. What role do you think that social media can play in getting the word out about stories like this?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the discovery of stories like this doesn't always come through the obvious sources, the mainstream media. Twitter obviously plays a huge role in just these types of movements finding out about each other, and then they sort of bubble up and become a bigger story, and then everyone's wondering, how that happens.
Just to expand on that, I mean, the answer is in the fact that we're able to report this story with these two people right now. We've had people send us several Storifys, including a Korean actress who's very famous who got involved in the story earlier in June. Now, I hope we can just play this shot. We have a recorded soundbite from her. Even though she was so scared to actually appear on the show, she sent us this in. Let's see if we can hear this.
Hi, my name is Kim Yeo-jin, and I'm Korean actress. Let me introduce my friend.
Okay, it seems that we're not going to be able to show this because we're having some technical difficulties. But basically, I want to ask Seung-mi, you found out about this story from a Korean actress who brought a lot of attention nationally to this story. Why was she and many others who have helped us tell this story scared to appear on the show? And why do you think that, are they scared of the government coming after them? What are they afraid of?
Just for Kim Yeo-jin, the actress, because every time she tells something on the media, actually the Korean media used to focus on Kim Yeo-jin, the Kim Jin-suk. So she wants the media focused on Kim Jin-suk. And the whole attention.
And if we focus on Kim Jin-suk, you've spoken to her recently. What has she told you in your last conversation with her? What has Kim Jin-suk told you the last time you spoke to her?
She was worried about me. How are you? How cold are you? Like this.
Mm-hmm. How cold are you, even though she's been there for 6 months?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the one point that's also worth bringing up is that the actress has actually apparently been summoned by the police to testify about what's going on. Presi, I want to come back to you again on this similar topic. We understand that in the Philippines, Hanjin Industry is working through a network of about 19 different contractors through whom they hire all their employees. So how can you hold them to any kind of criminal liability if they're actually operating through sub-companies?
There is a liability. The company has a liability, what the Philippine Labor Code says. What they are doing now, employing these several subcontractors in order to make the employee-employer relationship nebulous to avoid a union in the Philippines for the workers in Hanjin is against what the labor code is stating. Like, it is job-only contracting, and labor-only contracting is illegal because according to the law, if your business is shipbuilding and the workers are performing jobs that are part of creating a ship, that is supposed to be a regular work employed by Hanjin. No subcontractor can work in between that. And that is with the growing accidents at the shipyard, with the growing deaths and the growing number of maltreated Filipino workers by the Korean superiors, we are thinking of filing a class suit if they will not address this problem immediately.
So, John, I think part of what might be happening here is maybe the Korean government or the Philippine government isn't getting involved because there's so much money at stake. Hanjin is a very big company.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an interesting thing going on, not just here, but around the world, of sort of like grassroots movements protesting corporations. And, throughout history, it used to be the state that we're so afraid of, but now the corporation has sort of like become a second entity that many people are worried about.
Well, and on that point, we actually see this tweet on Ahmed's screen from Moon824. It says the Korean government has to walk up and stand behind the people, not the big corporations, moving jobs away from people. It will cause suffering in Korea. Now, we must note that we did repeatedly contact representatives of Hanjin Heavy Industries for an interview. We were told they would get back to us, but we have not heard from them so far. Sung-mi and Percy, I want to thank you both for joining us in the stream. It's been a pleasure. John, great having you here. We're going to be continuing at stream.aljazeera.com, discussing a little bit more about this issue as well as some other key issues that come to us. Continue conversating with us using the hashtag AJStream. We will see you online. Hey, welcome to the Post Show. We've got a couple of different things that we want to talk about today, but before we do that, I want to come back to this point that you were just raising, John, and Ahmed, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too. When you see people, it's not just that they're protesting governments, they're also protesting corporations. I mean, do you think what's happening is that people feel more empowered in this day and age, or do you feel that there are perhaps more liberties being taken with people's rights?
I mean, the cop-out answer, to be honest, is that it's a little bit of both, but I think it's certainly plausible that people are going to feel more empowered in an era when you have it's really basic. You have the power to reach millions of people in real time if you have compelling information or compelling photos or videos. I mean, it's hard to say that it boils down to that very fundamental thing, but in a way it does. Even with these mapping platforms, people are crowdsourcing that information, and as a result, it's a very powerful collective body of information.
It becomes a story.
It's a storyline that otherwise people might feel they could never navigate or find a way of, inserting themselves in whatever narrative they want to, talk about.
One of the things that's interesting about the Korea side of this story is, when we were first hearing about it, one of the concerns people were raising is that they felt like it wasn't getting enough coverage. It wasn't getting enough local coverage. It wasn't getting enough international attention. And now we see that using these technologies, basically, Kim Jin-suk is able to tell the world what's happening through Twitter, even if she has to do it by proxy. And
language is not a barrier, ironically.
Absolutely.
Because, quite frankly, and we should have maybe mentioned this in the broadcast, we had someone who was acting as an interpreter to ask these questions to Kim Jin-suk and then eventually translated for us. So granted, it is our job to verify that information, which we do, but we also can rely on other people, and this is back to the BBC story, to not do the work for us, but participate in sharing information and news.
So, John, that brings us back to the point that we started out with earlier on, where you see a company like the BBC seeming to retrench. They're saying now that they aren't, but there were signs given that they felt uncomfortable about the usage of Twitter amongst their employees. And yet now we see, for a show like ours, we have so much access that's granted by people using social media.
Yeah, and to go back to the point that you were making, I think that people, maybe they feel disempowered by the actual circumstances there. They're losing their jobs, they don't have enough money and to take care of their families, but they do feel empowered to tell that story, and if they do have access. I mean, that's a bigger problem, is not everyone has the same access to these tools, but then the problem becomes, how do we get them access?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be interesting to see and watch if this changes the behavior at Hanjin, because what people are saying is, well, they came and they made some concessions, they made peace with the union, but fundamentally they did not decide not to hold those layoffs. They're still moving work to the Philippines, and we're hearing that Philippine workers, they get 35% more productivity, but they also have to pay significantly less for a worker in the Philippines. So it's the same kind of sort of offshoring that people are talking about in different parts of the world. At the same time, the kind of safety considerations in the Philippines seem to be much worse. It's almost like the Philippine government would not hold Hanjin to the same standards that perhaps the South Korean government might.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And, I hate to harp too much on the fact of how people find out about these stories, but, our guest, Seung-mi Park, and she's a film director and also the actress who, got involved in the story early on in June, they found out about the story because Kim Jin-suk took to tweeting herself.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to emphasize the fact that people who otherwise might be going about their daily business are now paying attention to things that might not otherwise affect them in ways because of these tools, primarily. And so, that point I think cannot be emphasized enough.
Well, I want to stay in the Asian sub-region for a minute and go to the next story that also deals with social media, but it's a very different angle. And this is specifically about Facebook and the possibility of a Chinese company making a significant investment in that. Why don't you tell us about it, Ahmed?
Yeah, so a lot of people are debating whether this is actually going to happen and whether it's rumors, but it seems that there's evidence, as you can see right there, that according to a business news website called, which one is it? Business Insider, forgive me. Basically, there's a Beijing or a Chinese wealth fund that is trying to invest heavily and buy a huge stake, a pretty heavy stake, $1.2 billion in Facebook. And so a lot of people are saying, should Beijing be allowed to buy a part of Mark Zuckerberg's site? And then people saying that there's little need for concern that China is going to censor Facebook as a result of this. And actually, what is the actual practicalities of any of this? Even if a sovereign wealth fund in China does buy a stake in Facebook, what would you imagine are the concerns?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the securities of just foreign investment in general, I don't see how anyone could actually stop them if they wanted to make an investment into Facebook. I mean, what happens in a company like Facebook, which isn't public, they could go around to the employees who have stock or the people who are in a position to trade on that stock and deal directly with them. Because Facebook isn't a public company, it creates sort of like a loophole.
That's my question. Like, aren't sovereign wealth funds, even if they're affiliated loosely with the government, very different than the actual government, even if we're not talking about China? Because that's an argument made in this article in Forbes. They're saying sovereign wealth funds are pretty distinct from their governments, and then someone uses Norway's fund as an example.
Yeah, but I think that is a bit of that argument trivializes the issue, because Norway's sovereign wealth fund is coming out of a society where you have a quote-unquote free press and all kinds of other privileges, which you don't necessarily have in China. And the issue is Chinese companies are subject to Chinese law. I'm going to assume that a sovereign wealth fund in China would also be subject to Chinese law. So the question is, if that wealth fund has a significant investment in a platform like Facebook, at what point does it tip the balance where they will be trying to exercise their interest in maintaining, a good relationship with their own government?
Right.
Well, another argument made on another blog, actually, and that was Forbes that we were quoting, is saying that no matter what, their position or their influence over the company and how it conducts itself can't be that large, because even though $1 billion investment might seem like it might buy you a lot of influence, it's saying that in a site expected to be worth 100 times that when it goes public, it's not going to mean much, even if they have that much of a stake. I mean, it's worth noting it hasn't gone public yet. So.
Yeah, it hasn't gone public. We don't know when it's going to go public, and depending upon what how the valuation changes, that stake could mean something. I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, John. Like, what happens if China has already got a number of different social media platforms that are quite successful? What do you think is the interest in a platform like Facebook? Do you think that it's simply something that's economic, or do you think that this is an example of maybe a company or the country, the wealth fund, striving to maybe export some of the Chinese values and how business should be done online?
I mean, I think that's a possibility. I actually personally think it's purely economic. I think, people have watched the incredible valuation growth of Facebook, and everyone's trying to figure out a way to get in. So I think this is purely economic. And the fact is, there's a number of social networks in China that almost dwarf Facebook in number of users just within China. So that's really interesting,
I'm curious. Like, isn't China's Renren is pretty much designed to look like Facebook and is like coming up or growing pretty much exponentially in the sense that it's going to challenge Facebook. So why are they so into? Why would these sovereign wealth funds be interested in buying?
I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, maybe you've got money to spend, you want to make investments, you look where the growth could be, and it's possible that you're right. Maybe there is just an economic incentive here. But I remember we were doing a story about a month ago about the rise of Sina Weibo. And basically, it is China's answer to Twitter, so to speak, or at least that's what some people call it. And people who've used both, a lot of them argue that Weibo is much, much more robust and interesting and fun even than Twitter. So part of what I think is interesting is any given business, we assume values. Like when we talk about things like freedom of speech and freedom of the press, these are relatively newfangled ideas. These are not things that have been endemic to human society for centuries or millennia. And so when you think about how countries exercise their power, I just wonder, if in any given country, you look historically, all empires have sought to export not simply their goods and services, but their way of life. And would it not be possible that Chinese businesses and interests would be interested in exporting their particular value system as well? And the reason I say that is because if, let's say, something like, the English version of Sina Weibo, which we were reporting on previously, blows up, and lots of people outside of China start using it. Let's say that this investment of Facebook is successful. Maybe more investment happens. At what point do you get to the point where a company that's invested in one of these companies says, hey, I have to maintain my good relationship with the Chinese government. Therefore, it would be better if this company did not do X, Y, Z, P, or Q.
On that note, I was speaking to a friend of mine about China more generally and their role in the world moving forward. She knows a lot about it. And she was saying, I'm not concerned because even if China economically becomes, the, so to speak, superpower, culturally it will never, ever, achieve those lengths. And I think that's what you were kind of touching on a bit, whether it can or cannot.
And I think that
the French might have said that in the 20s about America.
Exactly. And I just think that it belies history. I mean, China was a cultural superpower. Long before, the United States, for example, existed. So people act like, China is all of a sudden rising. No, China is just waking up again after a bit of a slumbering period. That is a very old and powerful culture.
One last tweet I just want to get in there because it's pretty funny on this note. J. Lee Lloyd is saying, China wants to buy Facebook. Reminds me of when Japanese bought Pebble Beach and Rockefeller Center at peak. I guess assuming the price. But then also unrelated, but apparently Zuckerberg, so the founder of Facebook's been quoted as saying he believes Facebook can be an agent of change in China as it has been in other countries.
That's interesting because Mark Zuckerberg was notoriously silent, if I recall correctly, during the North African revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt in particular.
But now apparently people are quoting him as saying, just like it's been successful in helping bring about change in Egypt and Tunisia, China might be too.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think China is another issue, and we should do some more stories on there. A lot of interesting things going on over there. John, it's great having you here. I know you're going to be with us again tomorrow. Look forward to getting a little more into some of the stuff that you're doing. And Ahmed, great show as always. Thanks for joining us in the post show. It's been a blast. We will be back again tomorrow, but remember, you can give us your thoughts on this show and let us know what stories you want to cover by joining us using the hashtag AJStream. We will see you online at stream.aljazeera.com. You find more information there.